On today's episode of Locked on Wild, technically it was Minnesota Wild 6, New York Islanders 1, Tony DeAngelo 2. We'll recap the final game before the Four Nations face-off, and we'll ask the question, does anybody care about the Four Nations face-off?
Hey, this is Matt Boldy, and you're listening to Locked on Wild.
You're Locked on Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild, part of the Locked on Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome into another episode of Locked on Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network. We are your team each and every day, and we thank you for making Locked on Wild your first listen each and every day as well. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. Today's episode of Locked on Wild is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. On today's episode of Locked on Wild, Alex Micheletti joins us as we finally exhale. The Wild got to the Four Nations face-off break. We can take a breath, and I'm not going to lie, feels like the team kind of needs one. So we'll talk about the final game before the break against the New York Islanders, a 6-3 win for the Wild that looked dicey early on. And we'll talk about the Four Nations face-off as well as Eriksson Ek hurt, but not too hurt. All of that coming up on today's episode. My name is Seth Toupal, host of Locked on Wild. Getting back in the swing of things here. Bummed that I missed some of the festivities that were going on throughout the Islanders game, but hey, and it was Super Bowl weekend, boring Super Bowl from what I was able to see, but we don't have to break that down. So we'll just talk about the final game before the break. And Alex, it was interesting because the Minnesota Islanders had a real good game. Pretty much everybody had a really good game except Tony DeAngelo, who I would probably buy Ilya Sorokin some dinner after what took place. He had 2 goals that got knocked in off of Tony DeAngelo, and that helped propel the Wild to a 6-3 win. They were down 3-1 and 5 straight goals to seal it. So a nice way to end the first half for the Wild.
Yeah, good for Matt Boldy to get on the score sheet. It had been a while since he had scored. So thank goodness he was able to do that, and hopefully that gives him some momentum for Team USA here in the Four Nations too. But yeah, he was really struggling, and it's not all his fault, but he needed that for sure. He's been having some line mates that haven't been doing much either, and so it's been kind of been hurting his game too. And so it was really nice for him to get that some positive momentum.
Yeah, nice 3-point night. Had 4 shots on goal and a couple of goals, but as we talked about, one of the goals pretty clearly off of Tony DeAngelo.
Yeah.
And I liked in the recap, the highlights, how Matt Zuccarello points to Boldy and he's like, You're gonna get credit for the goal.
Right.
It is like I kind of laugh because it's probably one of the easier goals that Boldy will ever score in his career, mainly because he didn't have to do a ton. But sometimes you need goals like that to kind of get you going and just get you out of a little bit of a slump. And Yakov Trenin with a nice score, and also somehow 8 shots on goal.
Crazy,
like
right?
What?
Give those some of them to Marcus Johansson. Yeah.
Oh, he didn't have any. Yeah, you talk about it. I mean, that second line, and we'll talk about second half goals here in a second. But I do find it interesting too that just because of where the Wild are at in the salary cap, they go out and they acquire Vinnie Hinostroza, and he has come in and has given you more than some of those AHL guys have in short stints. And I think that underscores just how much that area was missing for large stretches of this first half, that you can pull a guy in off the scrap heap, for lack of a better term, and he can come in and just be better than a lot of the guys who've been playing on the fourth line.
Yeah, 100%. And, I think, Vinny's been in the league for quite a while with so many different teams, and maybe he's starting to realize this is his last shot to stay in the NHL, because that window can close real fast. Look at Sammy Walker. It's, different age than Vinny, but it can close real fast. Ask Kyle Rao that. So you really have to show, Bill Guerin that you belong, and maybe he doesn't stick around that very long, and the only reason why they're able to afford him is because of Kirill being on that long-term injury reserve. So maybe he gets sent to Iowa, or just straight out released, or gets picked up by another team off the scrap heap once Kirill comes back. But hey, he scored in his first game with the Wild too, even though he didn't think he deserved it. But that's an added bonus for him, and he's shown that speed that he's always had throughout his career, and good for him.
Brock Nelson had a goal, an assist, 8 shots on goal, and he went 8 of 17 in the face-off circle. Not only him, but Anders Lee had a goal on the night. So it seemed like
Peronovich too. Hibbing zone, and Hobie Baker is now on the Islanders too.
What a weird pickup. That was such a weird, but that's, I guess, the perfect. It's a perfect encapsulation of the Lou Lamoriello experiences.
Well, yeah. They picked up 3 defensemen that I know Dobson's out for quite a bit, but like the defenseman that they picked up, they got Tony out of Russia. They got Boquist off the scrap heap. It never fit in for him in Florida, and Peronovich was barely playing in St. Louis, and so that was 3 just out of the blue moves by Lou.
Yeah, and I mean that D core is just, it's weird. It's just a weird, and apparently Dobson is on the block for the Islanders. If you wanna try to acquire him, go right ahead. He's available.
There was rumors that the Islanders really wanted JT Miller too, and they were willing to throw Dobson and that, which would have been crazy to see. But they're definitely still on the hunt, and Barzal's hurt now too, so that's going to be interesting to watch, because he was basically one of their only skilled guys. They've always had a bunch of just grinders, and now
not a lot of skill ever. And so the Wild go into the break 33-19-4. And as we'll talk about here next, it feels like the break is very much needed. But, you look at, like, I have Money Puck up, and the Wild still at this point have a 95%, 94.88% chance to make the playoffs. New York Islanders are down to 27.11, but they're still in it. They're still in the mix in the East, because every team that is not the Buffalo Sabres is in the mix in the East. So I have no idea what's going to happen, but I have a feeling that somebody's going to end up upset at the at the end of the season because of where they end up in the standings.
No, 100%. And like you mentioned too, or like we mentioned, you never know what Lou Lamoriello is gonna, how he's gonna operate. He operates in the shadows there, and it's a good win against Sorokin. He's been on absolute fire for the Islanders, and one thing that I'm sure is going to make you laugh too. I'm sure you saw it too, but Patrick Waugh pulling the goalie with like 5+ minutes. He's done it everywhere, but it was just funny to see him bring that back.
some things never change. He would, if his team was down by 2 goals in the third period, I'm sure he would. I'm sure at some point he would throw the wrinkle out there to start the period without a goalie, just to see what the other team would do, and they'd say, "Oh, there goes Patty Waugh again." I don't even know if he goes by Patty. Probably not. He definitely strikes me as more of a Patrick.
No doubt. Yeah.
Nicknames are not for everybody, but
very intense Canadian.
Oh yeah, I've seen and heard some stories, but a good win for the Wild to finish up the break, and they end up it's weird to say it's the first half because they played like 50 games. The Wild actually have done some nice work with their penalty kill recently. They are 4th to last, and the New York Islanders as well. The Detroit Red Wings have a 69.7% penalty kill, which is like vomit-inducing bad. I can't wait to ask those two Locked on Red Wings. I can't wait to ask them their thoughts on the Detroit Red Wings power play or penalty kill, because out of the break, the Wild play Detroit for a home and home. Stupidest thing ever. But we're going to try to get a little crossover action going with Locked on Red Wings to see how they feel about Detroit's season so far, maybe how they feel about David Perron now that he's gone. See, just making sure people are paying attention, because he doesn't play for them anymore. He plays for the Ottawa Senators. But still, he was a very hotly contested potential free agent for the Wild that didn't pan out, thankfully. When we come back, we're going to talk about why this Four Nations face-off break comes at the perfect time for this Minnesota Wild team, but why the player who could benefit the most is going to keep on playing. We'll talk about that as we continue today's episode of Locked on Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked on Wild is brought to you by FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started. There's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Welcome back to today's episode of Locked on Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked on Wild your first listen each and every day. Folks, I have devised a challenge for the course of this Four Nations face-off break, 2-ish weeks. We're doing mid-season report cards on everybody. I have a formula devised that is actually going to it's actually going to use some math. I don't like math, but for this, I'm willing to give it a go. I've got a formula devised that I think is going to be pretty effective in giving out letter grades for everybody so far. And we're going to try to pinpoint the formula that determines the Minnesota Wild's performance if they hit benchmarks. For instance, if the Minnesota Wild get to this number of shots on goal, they win. If they don't, they lose. I'm going to go through with all the different stat categories to see if we can get the formula pinned down. So that's what's coming up here for the next 2 weeks with no games. And then once the season resumes, we'll postcast with you as we typically do. But Alex, I know sometimes you have a team that's rolling and you may say, this break comes at the worst possible time because you're just getting rolling. And, now all of a sudden you got to kind of stop. You go cold a little bit and you got to rev back up here in 2 weeks. Polar opposite case for the Minnesota Wild, because I think, and they've they were still able to string some wins together, but I think this team definitely needs a breather and an opportunity to just get away from the arena for, the get away from the game, the grind of a game for the next couple of weeks. Get a little vacation in, get a little R&R in, and most importantly, gear up for the stretch run with a playoff spot on the line.
Yeah, it hasn't been easy. There've been so many injuries to so many key players. Had a major suspension involved. That's in the middle of trying to figure out if the appeal's going to even go through or not, and it just might have to go to a third party arbitrator, which is just insane that even has to get to that point. And just guys having just random injuries and illness has gone through for the club, and they need this break in the worst way possible.
How concerned were you when word came through that Eriksson Ek is not going to play in the game against the Islanders? I was pretty out of it on Saturday, but that notification still popped up, and I was just like, what? But then after the game, it's nothing major. He's definitely going to be good to play in the Four Nations face-off.
That really is, that's one to watch. Him and Brodin too. They both have gotten beat up and have been injured over the past couple seasons, and you cringe that both of them are going, because they're two of the most important players on the team. They might not be the best players on the team, but they, at their position, I think they're the most important, even Ek more so than Kaprizov, because Ek is your center. He does so much for the team. He plays in such, critical minutes. And, we saw how they were against Dallas in the playoffs without him. It's a night and day difference. And, you can clearly tell that whatever's bothering him has affected him the entire season. He has 9 goals, and that just is way down. And it's very concerning. You're going to a meaningless tournament. It's not the Olympics. It's 4 teams. It's not including Russia. It's not including just all sorts of teams. The Czechs. It's a 4, like it says it in its name, and something the league hasn't done before, having this 2-week break like this. So it's it's going to be interesting to see if anybody gets hurt from this tournament, how teams are going to react.
Let's just do a little lowest since for Eriksson Ek's numbers. So what I should do is get the projection for what his numbers are expected to be, because as you mentioned, he's got 9 goals in 41 games. He's got 23 total points. So based off of what Eriksson Ek has done so far this year, he is projected to finish with 13 goals, 21 assists, 34 total points in 60 games. So the 13 goals would be the lowest he's had since he became a full-time regular for the first time since the 2020-2021 season. He was like a fourth-line guy for the first few years of his career. Got in it as a 21-year-old, and he was in single digits for the first 3 years that he regularly played. Then he had 19 goals in 2020, 2021. So this would be the lowest goals amount that he's had in a season since 2019, 2020. As far as the points go, 21 total points, or 34 total points, excuse me. That'd be the lowest he's had since the 2020, 2021 season. So we've talked about Eriksson Ek, and I think we just assumed that he was going to be able to keep that like clockwork production increase, because he's done it every year that he's been a regular guy. And this is going to be the first year now in 5 seasons that he hasn't, unless he gets 21 goals between now and the end of the season, which I don't like the math, but the faceoff percentage took a big dip. Like he was over 50% before he got hurt, and now it's just nosedived. He's definitely hurt. And like I get the whole pride in country thing. It's not something that players in the United States or Canada so much have because of the Stanley Cup.
Right.
Like that's the goal. But for a lot of these other teams, like you don't get a ton of NHL guys. You don't get a ton of players to the NHL level. And so these types of tournaments just carry way more weight for them. So I'm not going to fault a guy for playing, but I am also going to plead, take the 2 weeks off.
Yeah. Look at the Canucks. They let Quinn Hughes decide, and, Quinn's like, we're in the thick of a wild card race with Calgary. I can't afford to lose, or miss any more games and have the team, lose and have Calgary make it over Vancouver. And so, it was agonizing for him, but, I read in, a couple articles even today, that he was, going back and forth with his brother Jack, and, he's like, don't worry about it. We can, play in the Olympics here next year, and the following Olympics after that, because the NHL is committed to the 2026 Winter Olympics and the 2030. So there's more opportunities for Quinn to represent Team USA in an actually meaningful event, not like this gimmick Four Nations.
Speaking of, we should probably talk about that. Don't worry, Trav. We're not gonna break it down in detail, but I am going to dive into a topic that we have talked about over a few of these squad shows. It's been pretty prevalent in the squad shows that we've done here with the other Locked On hosts, but it is a topic that I want to dive into here a little bit with you, Alex. Is like, why has this not been massively marketed? Like, why is this just like oh, hey, by the way, this thing is going on? So we're going to dive into that a little bit, because it feels like if you're doing a new thing like this Four Nations face-off, you should probably make sure that people care about it.
100%.
So we'll talk about that to finish off the show here today on Locked On Wild. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by Indeed. You just realized your business needs to hire somebody yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Well, that's easy. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed's sponsored jobs post put your post at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidates faster. For instance, I was on the job hunt for 5 months over the summer, and Indeed helped get me the best possible jobs to fit my qualifications. And that's as somebody that's looking for a job. If you're a business, Indeed does such a great job of just putting out there the skills that are required to do the position that you're advertising. They can help reach the right candidates fast. And now you can speed up your hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need. Welcome back to today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Starting tomorrow, we will be going through our midseason report cards for you. And I'm going to start off with a couple of fun ones because I think you can probably guess which route I'm going here. So just be on the lookout for a particular favorite Minnesota Wild player that is going to get a report card. We're gonna test it. We're gonna take it for a test drive tomorrow, and I think everybody will like the route that I go. So stay tuned for that. But Alex, speaking of stay tuned, the Four Nations Face-Off is going on this week. This is the first time hearing of this. Evidently, it is rosters put together from the United States, from Canada, from Finland, and from Sweden. I literally have not heard about this. Okay, I'm joking. I know exactly what's going on, but this is frustrating because we can see what the NHL is trying to do. They're trying to turn this into a big thing, like something that they can put out there, because the All-Star game just continues to go backwards from a rating standpoint. Gee, I wonder why. But they where is the branding? Where's the marketing? Where is any of the advertising for this thing? You'll hear this in the squad show later this week, but like I said during that, I remember seeing the rosters, and that is literally it. That is literally the extent that I've heard about this.
Yeah, it's been other than, I mean, you saw some news out of lines, but yeah, it's been so minimal. It's crazy, and there's been some talk over the past couple of weeks of ratings being horrendous on TNT and on ESPN, and they aren't doing a great job even marketing the regular season games. Yeah. And they're putting matchups of teams that nobody wants. It's like, who did they ask the fans on who they want to see on national TV? No one wants to watch the Blackhawks, and no one wants to see a Sharks Kraken game, that is starting at 9 or 10 at night, for some people on the East Coast too. It's just, just horrendous matchups and not enough marketing. I mean, Macklin Celebrini could, walk down the street and the majority of the people would have no idea what he looks like. It's just the league from a branding and marketing standpoint, just like what's going on. And especially if you want Four Nations to be a thing going forward, you have to pump money into it.
Yeah, you gotta care about it. And it'll never be a situation where we say that the NHL is the worst amongst the Pro 4 at marketing its product, because Major League Baseball exists. And as bad as it is with the NHL, it is infinitely worse for Major League Baseball. How do people not know who Mike Trout is? There are baseball fans that don't know who Mike Trout is.
Yeah, it's that's why the MLB and NHL, that's why they're so below NBA and NFL. Yeah, it's crazy.
But it's like, and I like just the number of things. Like I've heard people suggest, like on one of the previous squad shows, the Locked On Flames host, who frequently is on the East Coast. She said that the tickets to go watch the Four Nations face-off games at TD Garden are like $600.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
How are you marketing this to fans? What you're telling fans is this is only supposed to be for highbrow, like sponsors, corporate level people. These are the only people that need to attend.
People going to the games in suits.
Yeah, and that's the wrong message to send for NHL fans. You should want to create rooting interest in this thing. You should want NHL fans to care about the players that they have in it from their respective teams.
You're not going to get young people, families there. Heck no. And that's all these leagues are trying to get the younger demographic, younger people to go to games, and it's the opposite of growing the game.
Yeah, it's just assuming I will say I think of the core four, the NHL does have the most, like, niche isn't the right word, but it's one of those things where you have to know what's going on the most, I think, in the NHL. And, the diehard hockey fans are always going to be there. But it feels like the NHL just is like, the people that don't necessarily follow the NHL, they'll find it. They'll find the games. I don't even know what channel they're on.
No, I know some games are on TNT, but have you seen an ad on it? It's
nope.
I don't, nothing on X or, Facebook, it's been just nothing. I mean, if the Athletic wasn't around, we wouldn't know lines. Yeah. It's crazy.
Like I literally, and people will get a kick out of this because the only mentions that I am going to give the Four Nations face-off over the next few days is in just saying, oh, such and such player for the Wild scored. It'd be nice to be able to watch those. If you have to go through hoops to watch the games,
you aren't going to get the casual fan for sure.
Yeah. So, we'll take the break. I will take the break to just kind of get caught up and get some nice traction going for the final push for the show. But I did want to finish, Alex. I don't know if you saw this, but I want to give the Wilds full credit for something that they absolutely did not have to do. Obviously, this hits a little closer to home for me now. The Mankato West boys hockey team, they were playing in a tournament in Duluth at the end of December, had the sticks stolen out of their bus. Now, I actually did report on that story. They got most of them back. So there was some good that came out of that. It was announced on Friday that the Minnesota Wild said, hey, the game that you guys had to cancel between Mankato West and Anoka, come on down and play it at the X, and we'll create the full NHL game day experience for you. Like, they have the same PA announcer there as they would for a normal game. Like, they're going to do pregame intros. They got a DJ in house. Nordy is in the house. Full, like, they didn't need to do that, but that I think is why that I think is a good reason as to why this is the state of hockey, is because it's all connected. Like, the Minnesota Wild are at the top, but from the college teams to the high school, all the way down to all of the levels below that, it's all just one giant connected heartbeat in the hockey world. And so kudos to the Wild for keeping an eye on that story, like, as it unfolded, and just saying, it would be really fun for these kids that went through just an absolutely crummy situation is if we did something to make that game that they missed special. And that just, like, I saw that and I just was like, that's really cool. And so I wanted to give the Wild some love for doing that, because, again, it's not anything that they needed to do. The game it's free of charge. It's happening tonight, free of charge at the X. Like, they're not profiting much off of it.
It costs a lot to rent out the X too, and to have everything be free is amazing. I know you live there now. I was a part of that community for 4 years and graduate from MSU Mankato, so I know it means a lot to those people, and I'm glad they got most of the sticks back, because it's a blue collar town, as you know, and I mean, most of those families, I'm sure the parents are 2-3 jobs. Sticks are what, $300-$400, and I'm sure it costs a lot for all those families to go up to Duluth and then to not even get the full experience, and then have the travel back down there, and just worried about how they're gonna replace the sticks. And so I'm glad. Kudos to the Duluth Police Department too for sticking with it and,
Yes.
getting those back. Cause I know it means a lot to those families, and, kudos to the Wild, like you mentioned. And, the hockey family, whenever there's a tragedy or, something like this, they always step up, which is great to see here in Minnesota.
Yeah. It's a nice bit of kind of closure and uplift after what was just like, I hated having to report on that, because it's something that should never happen. But turns out there are people in this world that just are rotten. So that's all I'll say about that. But again, kudos to the Wild for doing that for Mankato West. And that's going to do it for today's show. Again, we'll keep you fully dialed into the Four Nations face-off here all throughout the tournament. Not. We're going to have some fun here over these next couple of weeks. I'm actually excited for this, because it's like when you go through a full stretch of games and you don't have a chance to practice. This is practice now. This is practice for Lockdown Wild, and I'm excited to get a few reps in to just work on some stuff. So we'll have episodes for you every day throughout this break, with intermittent Four Nation face-offs updates. Sorry, Trav. Kidding. But yeah, enjoy the rest of your night, and we'll start the report cards tomorrow. Make sure to subscribe if you have not already. We are at 3,170 subscribers. So continuing to vault up the ladder. If you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you do, so you don't miss out on any new episodes, because Locked On Wild is you covered every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.